conference. We're going to talk today about integrating TDM into the planning process. We're delighted to have you all with us. Those of you that are Net Conference alum know that these are brought to you by the Association for Commuter Transportation in partnership with the National Center for Transit Research at Qatar at the University of South Florida. This is about our 30th Net Conference, I think, and we're really excited about the topic that we have for you today. We think we have about 30 sites from 10 ACT chapters joining us for today's program, and we'd like to welcome all of those. And for any folks in the audience that are not yet ACT members, this is one of the benefits of ACT membership. Come and join us and benefit from these great professional development opportunities. There are credits available for today's session. Those of us that are certified planners are delighted to see that we can actually earn certification maintenance credits for our AICP certification. That's a first with our Net Conferences, and we're pleased to add that to the kinds of things that we can make available to our partners. I'd like to remind everyone that these sessions are being recorded. You've been watching in the introductory slide about how everything works. You're in listen mode at the moment, but if you mute your phone, the quality will be even better. Watch in the up right-hand corner of your screen if you need to give us any feedback about having problems or needing us to speed up. Here's where we're headed today. We're going to have an overview first about the transportation planning process in general, and then we're going to hear from two speakers from the Tampa area, kind of a case study. Sandy Moody is a friend, an old friend from ACT days, working on TDM for a long time. She's going to talk about TDM long-term plans. And Beth Alden is her partner at the MPO, and Beth is going to kind of look at the same process from the MPO's perspective and give us some insights into what kinds of things the MPO was trying to accomplish. So with that kind of introduction, we always like to get some sense of who you are out there and how many of you there are, since our speakers can't see you. So if you would look around the room and take a head count and touch the screen and give us some sense of how many folks have joined you at your site for today's Net Conference. So it looks to me as if approaching half the audience are in small groups of 2 to 4, but we have, looks like we have 3 sites with more than 8 folks. So a good turnout for today's session. We'd also like to have some sense of how familiar you are about the regional transportation planning process and whether you already actively participate or not. So ask folks to put up their hands and give us a sense of the proportion of folks at your site who actively participate. They submit grant applications, they attend meetings. We have a very active group. Wow. Wow. 2/3 or so are active participants, and maybe 20% are real newbies who want to learn for the first time what kinds of possibilities there are for TDM in the regional planning process. Well, let's get right to it, and I think what I'll do is introduce all 3 of our speakers first, even though, there's their slides again. First up, we're going to hear from Egan Smith, who is FHWA's Planning Oversight and Stewardship. He's a member of FHWA's Planning Oversight and Stewardship team. Boy, I'm sorry about that, where he serves as the office planning liaison for 8 FHWA division offices, particularly on issues related to planning and planning regulations. Egan also provides overall support in specific planning areas like congestion management, operations and ITS, planning for operations, and performance-based planning. And he does this with over 2 decades of experience in transportation engineering. Egan will be joined by Sandy Moody, who is the Director of Programs and Operations for the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transportation Authority, TBARTA. Those of us who've known Sandy for a while recognize that she was before the Executive Director for Bay Area Commuter Services. She serves as a Region 7 Director for the ACT Board, and she was Project Manager for development of the long-range TDM plan instituted in Hillsborough County for their long-range transportation plan for 2025. And then we will hear from Beth Alden. Beth, the Certified Planner and the Multimodal Systems Group Leader for the Hillsborough MPO. She leads an award-winning team of planners with a long-range vision for transportation that is safe and usable by all. Beth, that may be one of my favorite mission statements ever. Her group's work has been recognized for its 2050 plan, for lots of creative public engagement campaigns, for walkable communities efforts, livable roadways designs. Her team is forward-looking and the kinds of planners that we like to work with. So with that kind of introduction, Egan, let's get your slides up, and would you please give us an overview of the transportation planning process?
Thank you for that introduction. Good day. My name is Egan Smith, and I'm with the Federal Highway Administration Office of Planning, Environment, and Realty. This presentation focuses on the planning process itself and the key elements that make up an effective planning process. Our hope is that you take away an understanding that planning is not just about which final decisions or outcomes are made, rather about making sure appropriate information is available to inform those planning decisions. So today we are going to talk about the process that leads up to making those final decisions that address our transportation needs. Also, I'll touch on our recent efforts to integrate travel demand management into the planning process. For the purposes of this presentation, we can view TDM as one set of management and operations strategies designed to optimize the performance of a multimodal transportation system, to provide more effective and sometimes less expensive use of the transportation system, and to address air quality issues as well. Transportation planning is a cooperative process designed to foster involvement by all users of the system, such as the business community, community groups, environmental organizations, the traveling public, freight operators, etc. Through a proactive public participation process conducted by metropolitan planning organizations, state departments of transportation, and transit operators. I'll discuss the major transportation players in our later slides. Planning is a continuous process that provides information, tools, and the public involvement needed for improving transportation system performance. And from these major policy and planning issues on this slide, you can see where TDM would play a significant role in, example, air quality, congestion management, and systems and operations, etc. Transportation planning is the process of establishing a community vision and identifying how transportation fits into that vision and addressing the needs of the community for transportation, demonstrating how changing demographics will influence or impact the transportation system, assessing opportunities and challenges of the anticipated future relationship to the community vision and the transportation system, identifying short and long-term options to help meet the vision within the scope of the changing environment, developing a financial plan to fund implementation, and finally, implementation is an important part of planning because it brings us back to reality and our vision. Either we are implementing our vision or we need to adjust the vision to better express our change in reality. And the financial plan is a significant factor that impacts implementation. Each of these bullets relate back to the community vision because good planning always comes back to the vision. What will the community look like, feel like, and operate like in the future? The process of planning is really all about figuring out how to reach that vision. This is a graphical illustration of the process described in the previous slide. I will discuss the elements in more detail in the later presentation. Before we move on, I should indicate federal legislation explicitly requires these 8 planning factors be considered when developing the transportation plan. It should be noted the overall planning requirements are the same. However, the process may be different based on the complexities and size of the area that's conducting the planning effort. Now let's talk about the players involved in the transportation planning process. We have the U.S. Department of Transportation, that is Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration, and they provide the guidance and set policies and review and certify planning activities. But the activities are done by the state DOT and the metropolitan planning organizations. Federal Highway Administration has a division office in every state, and FTA has 10 regional offices. And these offices conduct the business of the federal government. And they ensure that the public and stakeholders are involved in the process, keeping it as transparent as possible. State DOTs coordinate with MPOs and neighboring states and plan for rural areas. MPOs are made up of urbanized areas of 50,000 and above. And public participation and stakeholder involvement occurs throughout the planning process. To understand how the process works, you have to have some idea of the jurisdictions of these organizations. The state DOT jurisdiction is obvious. It's within the state boundaries. However, the MPO boundaries vary. Each of the blue boundaries represents an MPO on this map. Some have populations in the millions. There are 384 MPOs. Of these, further classification is made for MPOs with a population of over 200,000, and these are referred to as Transportation Management Areas, or TMAs, and we have approximately 84 TMAs. There are more stringent rules for TMAs, and they require certification by Federal Highway and Federal Transit. Both the MPOs and the states follow the planning process, and they both plan with the public in mind. Very few states are completely urbanized, but from this illustration, you can see how the MPOs are distributed. The State Department of Transportation and the Metropolitan Planning Organizations conduct the planning exercises, and their main products are quite similar. They both produce a detailed long-range plan covering a 20-year period. However, the state plan can be more policy-driven. The MPO plan is fiscally constrained, and there's a balance between project cost and revenue to pay for the projects. They both produce transportation improvement programs covering a 4-year period. The MPO's Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is a 4-year program of transportation improvements based on the long-range plan and is designed to achieve the area's goals using spending, regulating, operating, management, and financial tools. The state Transportation Improvement Program is based on the state's long-range plan and designed to serve the state's goals using spending, regulating, operating, management, and financial tools as well. But for metropolitan areas, the state's Transportation Improvement Plan incorporates the Transportation Improvement Plan developed by the MPO, because the MPO's region is essentially usually a subset of the state. Who are the contributors to the planning process? Essentially, who has a voice? The planning process includes a variety of participants, all of whom serve a variety of purposes. In the center of the slide is the public, and this is because the public are the ultimate users of the transportation system, so their involvement is critical. It's important to remember that and consider the importance of their role. Also, every MPO has a public participation plan to ensure public involvement in the planning process. The state is also required to document and use public involvement procedures. The plans and projects developed to address the community vision are not developed without the key input of the public and other stakeholders. Every opportunity is utilized to keep the public and stakeholders involved as the process unfolds. The other bubbles you see includes regional agencies, that includes rural areas, tribal governments, special interest groups, the private sector. These are the players that determine the needs. Now let's talk about the elements of the transportation planning process. We briefly touched on this slide, and as indicated, it all starts with the community vision. And at this point, considerations of TDM can play a key role. We then move to the alternatives and evaluation, or from problem to potential solution. Once underlying causes of problems are identified, it's time to find strategies to help resolve them. TDM has been emerging as a low-cost alternative to address issues in a timely fashion that can have significant impact. For every problem, there may be multiple solutions, so the key is to identify a strategy that makes sense to the users and that will be supported by the decision makers. Local agency involvement is critical at this stage because many solutions will be the local agency's responsibility. So it's important that they not only understand the need, but they also understand their role and responsibility to resolve that problem with the agreed-to solution. So looking at this process a different way, once the problem is identified and potential solutions or strategies are found, it's time to take another look at the plan's vision for the transportation system. This is also the point at which information about the cost and potential benefits are developed so that the strategies can be evaluated and planners can begin to put together the information decision makers need to complete the planning process. Now let's return to the products that are developed to address the transportation issues. That is the long-range plans and the STIPs and TIPs that we discussed previously. This is where you identify top priority projects for funding. Cost sometimes exceeds available funding, and you must set priorities and criteria to evaluate options. These decisions are documented in the TIP and STIP and are designed to support the decisions made in the long-range plan. So only those projects that are either listed in the long-range plan or support the goals and policies of the long-range plan may be included in the TIP and then included in the STIP. Additionally, each MPO is required to develop a priority process to help select the projects for the TIP. It's important to make sure the projects included for funding in the TIP and STIP reflect the priority of the region and the state. Now that we have our project, we can move to the project development stage. Project design and environmental review are conducted at this stage. We have been trending towards addressing environmental issues at an early stage to avoid environmental showstoppers late in the game. Next, deployment and monitoring, or the feedback loop. A very important and sometimes neglected element of the planning process. It is rarely here that we have the opportunity to develop some historic data to support our decisions, and this can be used to justify our future decisions as well. Now that we have touched on the transportation planning process, let me point to some of the products that we are developing to address integrating TDM into that process. But before we move on, let me present a more contemporary TDM definition. Managing demand is about providing travelers, regardless of whether they drive alone, with travel choices such as work location, route, time of travel, and mode. In the broadest sense, demand management is defined as providing travelers with effective choices to improve travel reliability. Demand management is designed to better balance people's needs to travel a particular route at a particular time with the capacity of available facilities to efficiently handle this demand. This definition of TDM incorporates many strategies not often considered within the realm of TDM, such as road pricing, operational strategies to shift travel route and time, such as advanced travel information, and even strategies to influence which lane travelers use on a given facility. There are three efforts I want to touch on briefly. The ride-sharing toolkit, TDM to address livability goals, and the TDM desk reference. First, the ride-sharing toolkit. This report serves as both an analysis of current trends in ride-sharing and a toolkit for public agencies, large and small, to create ride-sharing programs tailored to meet the needs of their respective constituencies. Best practices from around the U.S. are illustrated in a series of case studies, and the report also contains a step-by-step how-to guide for implementation. The report concludes with a comprehensive database of both public and private sector entities already engaged in ride-sharing around the world. As a follow-up, my colleague Robin Smith at Federal Highway is working to expand on this initial research and demonstrate how ride-sharing supports livable communities and sustainability goals. A link is also provided on this slide. This ongoing task will develop a report that will include a discussion of bicycle, pedestrian, and TDM planning at the metropolitan level, as well as a set of case studies to be used as models of how these projects are incorporated as a group into the metropolitan planning process. Finally, the desk reference. This document is being developed to serve as a desk reference on integrating TDM into the transportation planning process. The purpose of the desk reference is to provide the reader with a better understanding of where, how, and when to integrate TDM into the transportation planning process. As such, the guidance focuses on the planning process at different levels and on various public policy objectives that TDM can address. This document is in its draft stage currently, and we are rolling out the draft version in a series of workshops and seminars with feedback from users to present practical options to folks engaged in the process. And the desk reference will address the contemporary definition of TDM in its full extent. Thank you, and the Transportation Planning Capacity website, joint venture of Federal Highway Administration and FDA, will keep you updated on our efforts, and the link is provided on this slide that you can visit occasionally to see the updates on our efforts as they progress.
Egan, thanks very much. It's very interesting to take a step back and look at the broad view and consider the roles that the various levels of actors play, and great to hear about these new tools that will be available soon. Let's shift gears from the broad view to the very specific view. Sandy, talk about, let's chat about TDM in the long-range plan.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate that introduction, and I really appreciate hearing about the federal process because it fits quite nicely into looking how you look at things from the local level. And I'm really pleased to be here today because this is one of the subjects that's near and dear to my heart, integrating TDM in the planning process. Specifically, how to get it in your local plans, your regional plans, and in the statewide planning process as well. It can really be beneficial to your programs from a sustainability aspect as well as getting your agency to the table when decisions are being made. And this has always been something that has been a little difficult in the past. I speak from experience in the program aspect of things. So hopefully today you'll get an idea of how, at least from this aspect, how we approached it, and perhaps some of these strategies will work for you as well. Just to let you know, for those of you that have met me or heard of me before, as Donna mentioned earlier, I used to be the Executive Director of Bay Area Commuter Services, which at that time was the Regional Commuter Assistance Program Agency for the Department of Transportation District 7. It covered 5 counties in West Central Florida. And now we are part of the Regional Transportation Authority called TBARTA. And this particular part of our program is the Commuter Services. It has its own little logo that kind of plays off our main logo, but a lot of the programs, many of the programs, if not more of the programs, are actually now under the auspices of TBARTA. A lot of people have been asking me about that. And basically, TBARTA is still doing things the way that BACS was doing them as far as the regional component of things for carpooling and van pooling, emergency ride home programs, commuter van pool, Telework Tampa Bay, which is our telework program that we worked through a few years back with a sister agency. We also have been working with some of the developing community to include TDM strategies in their planning for development and redevelopment. And it's very gratifying to have the development community come to you and ask you for advice on how to actually include these things as they work towards their development orders and getting things put together to make it better for everyone traveling to that particular site. We worked with public awareness campaigns in the past, as many of us do. Some of the maintenance of traffic issues when construction is going on within the area with different entities, especially the Department of Transportation. We do work with school pooling and a lot more than that. There's just a lot of components to TDM, and as we've grown over the years, more and more seems to come under that umbrella of demand management. So everything that I'm telling you today is based on what Bay Area Commuter Services did a few years back, around the beginning of the decade 2000. Things were a lot different then. It was pre-9/11. Gas was a lot cheaper than it is right now. But we decided as an agency that we really wanted to look at why can't we integrate what we do into the planning process, and why can't we get some sort of plan that will be sustainable over time and will ensure that we have some kind of sustainable future in the planning process and in the funding process. We're fortunate in this area that we have not only a regional component, but we also have 4 transportation management organizations in a lot of our urban areas. And together, the 4 TMOs and the Regional Assistance Program, we work pretty strongly together to try to have more impact, but because we were working in separate areas, sometimes more was needed. So to really achieve that greater impact, we needed to get some sort of buy-in from a lot of different levels on the decision-making process to include these strategies in the long-range planning process. So why did we do it? Why should you do it? Well, first of all, I have to actually take my hat off to Phil, because he really opened my eyes up to something to think about. A lot of times agencies go after funding and say, okay, if you give us this much money, we can do this much. When in reality, you need to say, okay, here's the program. This is what we can do in this program, and it will cost this much. So you're managing your resources and your expectations, but you have a definitive plan. And in that sense of the word, you can kind of actually see, okay, if I expend this much money on ride matching programs, perhaps it will garner this much response. Or if I use this much toward a van pooling program, it will garner this response. So that was one of the things that really opened my eyes in this process, was to realize it's not just I need money, it's I need money to accomplish something. So the resources and the expectations part of things, it's really important to learn and kind of adopt early on in your thinking process. So identifying the funding needs and the ability to program those needs was essential in this process. And basically we wanted to move the thoughts about encouragement for these strategies to actually some sort of stronger language that would really say, we don't want you to attempt to do this, we want you to implement this in your process. So basically, the other thing about it was to get everybody on the same page. We wanted people that had the decision-making powers to actually sit down and have a discussion and be on the same page, understand that what it means to have a certain percentage of return on your ride-sharing efforts. We all know how difficult it is to quantify all kinds of things, considering basically things like, I'm sorry, a little window just popped up from me and kind of threw me off my stride a little bit. We want to be able to speak the same language, and we want to be able to say, okay, when we talk about a 20% return on investment for, say, the van pooling program, we want to ensure that when we say we can do this for this much money, that it actually can get done, and make it believable and insurable. We all know, again, how we do these projects where perhaps you're talking about a marketing campaign, and it's very hard to quantify the results of such a thing. And it's also very hard to decide what it is you're actually trying to produce. Is it number of people who are aware of your program? Is it people who actually sign up to do something different other than driving alone? So I think everybody can relate to that. And, of course, all the effects of these strategies need to be quantifiable. Okay, so the plan really needs to go out beyond the immediate future. You don't need to look at a year-to-year situation. You need to plan for many years out. And I can tell you, based on some of our difficulties in the past, one of our huge hurdles was that we are, at the time, we're funded on a year-to-year basis. And so we didn't really have the funding in place for a long-range strategy, but we decided that in order to be successful, we needed to just act like it doesn't matter, we're going to plan for this regardless of whether or not we have this funding in place on a long-term basis. So we have to be able to predict what this is going to do on the air quality and on the congestion on this long-term basis. And this is where it makes it very important to choose the right consultant to actually perform these tasks in getting this plan done. Okay. I cannot speak any more emphatically about if you're going to achieve some kind of success in this particular instance, you have to invite everybody to the table, everybody that has anything to do with making decisions. And that means from your MPO staff and the county staff, local municipality staff, definitely your DOTs, everybody that has any kind of input on getting any kind of decision-making done for your plan, right down to getting into the community and inviting your Citizens Advisory Committee members. It's very important that you bring enough people to the table to make this process viable, and that's why we went the extra mile to invite all these people to the table, and pretty much everyone participated. So, again, Cutter did this process for us, Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida. They collected all the baseline data. They actually went to areas to identify scenarios that were close to what we have here in Hillsborough County, Florida, which is the Tampa Bay area. They used the commuter model for the County Activity Center and employer information. That was the EPA model. And then they developed the plan in partnership with our agency, which was called BACS at the time, and the advisory committee. Had a lot of meetings. So by and large, what happened was we were able to, at the end of the day, come up with a plan that had quantifiable measures that could be validating all the strategies' effectiveness. And you'd be kind of surprised, and I would encourage each of you when you see the link to actually access the plan, which you'll see a little later on in the presentation. If you go take a look at it, it's a very good read, and you would be actually amazed at the pieces that give you the most bang for the buck, so to speak. And again, it's going to be different in different areas of the country. Those of you who have more transit support in the area would probably go towards a different area than we did. However, you know, it's just a matter of looking at what works in your area and being able to quantify what works in your area. So by using this process, the decision makers have specific language that can be used, and they can state exactly the amount of congestion that can be reduced due to these measures. It identifies most of the important strategies for that particular area, and specifically ours, and there's a definitive plan in place that not only is identified in the long-range plans for the county, but it's also the plan that we follow when we are looking for our funding. So you can see by this slide that basically the terminology was encourage, and now there is requirement there. That's huge. So that's one reason why we get so much response from the development community now, because it is in the comprehensive plan to look at these and implement these. And as you can see in this one before, it just basically talked about kind of like the ARI talk about TDM, and then this specifically says how much money is going to be allocated beginning in fiscal 2010. So we had supporters in the MPO. TDM was recognized as the tools that we needed to reduce traffic congestion. And because we used the commuter model, it was basically something that validated exactly what was being done in the process. Now, this is the big payoff for you. Not only are you going to get all these wonderful things that we've just discussed, but you're also going to have a forum for getting these strategies out in the open to all your decision-making boards. But even if, for example, you're doing it in one area and it's not actually being done in another area for a long-range plan, because the one plan takes off, most likely you're going to get some drive from other areas to include this too if you're in a regional situation. We were very fortunate in the fact that because of this, we were actually able to get to the table in the technical advisory capacity in virtually all the counties in which we work right now. We have 4 of the 5 counties in which we're working for the Commuter Services Program. Actually, 4 of them have MPOs, and the 5th one is just actually getting a TPO together, a Transportation Planning Organization. So that snowballed into allowing us to have a voice on not only the regional area, but the statewide area as well. We've commented many times on the state planning process for the state of Florida. We have been called upon many times to actually give our opinions on different aspects of what's included in languages for long-range planning, even outside of our area, because this program has been presented to a lot of people. I've presented this program to ACT a couple of times. So there is definitely a benefit for not only us, but the benefit of sharing this information to other people, just like we're doing today. Okay, here's what you need to do. You need to make your plan, and then you need to follow it. You need to actually take your plan, follow it, kind of put your things together as far as any kind of applications you put in for funding needs to follow your plan. What good is a plan if you're not actually following it? It's kind of like trying to follow a roadmap that doesn't exist for the area that you need. It does you no good to do the plan unless you plan on following. And also, if you're following the plan, that holds everybody else to following the plan as well. You need to definitely use this plan for building your relationships in your planning arena. Definitely, it is not necessarily what you know, it is who you know. So the more people that you can meet in the planning arena, and you never know who's actually going to get into that arena. Many people that I started off knowing in one area now have more of a say-so in how funding is done and what is actually done in the transportation planning process. So you just never know how those people that you meet on one side of things might not progress to another side of things. So learn who's in there now, learn who's potentially waiting in the wings to get involved in the process as well. I have learned in this process that TDM is not just ride-sharing. It's not just van pooling. It's not just providing emergency ride-home programs. There's a lot of components that TDM can lend a hand and assist in. Congestion management systems process, just basically getting involved in all aspects of the planning process. Don't limit yourself. The sky's the limit. The more you invest in getting into this process, the more you will receive in the long run. So as the last bullet says, it's a continual process, and you need to expect to update that plan. We're looking at that even as we speak, and I would say to each of you, build that into your process. Okay, this is the website I referred to for getting actual copy of the report that was done by Cutter, so you can access that, and I know many of you will be able to, if you don't already have the handouts, you can actually get those a little bit later. And I'm happy to be contacted about any aspects of this presentation, and when we get to questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Sandy, I can hear the questions being formulated as we speak. Thank you. It's great to hear from one of our own who has done this and can, is so generous in sharing lessons learned. Beth, help us look from the MPO's perspective on what TDM can bring to the table.
Well, thanks, Donna. I'm very happy to be with you today. I started working for the MPO in Tampa in 1999, and before that I worked for the Tampa Downtown Partnership doing TDM, and that's when I met Sandy, and we've collaborated on many things since then. So it's a pleasure to be able to talk a little bit about that. For TDM professionals to have a seat at the table with the MPO, it helps to know what the table is. And Egan told you about these required parts of the MPO planning process. I'll give you some examples of how TDM can fit into each one of these, starting out with the Unified Planning Work Program. The UPWP, MPOs are creatures of the federal government. We have a lot of alphabet soup. But this is our work program for the MPO's planning work. It's a budget that's updated every year to 2 years. MPOs receive PL or planning funds through the Federal Transportation Authorization, and they spend those planning funds on planning projects with a budget that's approved by the board. As it says here, some of those tasks are mandated and others are local priorities. An example of a local priority might be going into more detail on the TDM planning process. The long-range TDM plan that Sandy just told you about was funded with congestion mitigation and air quality funds, which Bay Area Commuter Services applied for. But there are other opportunities to fund TDM planning activities through your MPO. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about how TDM was incorporated into our long-range transportation plan. The long-range plan or metropolitan transportation plan is sort of the bread and butter planning activity for MPOs. It sets sort of the context and direction for all of the plans the MPO does. And it's something that's updated every 4 to 5 years. It's a bridge between comprehensive plans in your area that show where growth is going to be in your community and capital improvement programs that list infrastructure projects that are going to be built or public transit services that are going to be provided, within the next 5 years. So one of the implementers in our area is the TBARTA or Bay Area Commuter Services program. The long-range plan it's typically developed to meet a variety of goals. Egan showed you some of the federal requirements, the federal planning factors. There may also be some locally important factors. For example, Tampa still has a 10.5% unemployment rate. Economic vitality is a very important priority here locally. But those goals are operationalized using performance criteria, measurables, that help the planners and the board pick the projects that are the highest priority. And this is where the kind of data analysis from the long-range TDM plan comes in handy, where you've estimated the impact on reducing delay, for example, or on air quality benefits. And the object of this game is, as the planners assign future revenues to high-priority projects, that you get those high-end performers included into your cost-affordable long-range plan. We use 10 criteria in our most recent plan. The weights were assigned through a public engagement process. They were approved by our board. Our advisory committees asked for a level playing field for all types of projects, but different projects perform in different ways, and so we developed a fairly elaborate process for scoring the different types of projects, including TDM projects. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So we created a scoring system that could give up to 5 points for each of those 10 criteria. And you're seeing one of the criteria here on this slide, reducing traffic congestion. So the different modes gain points in different ways. Like a highway project would get 5 points if it reduces the forecast traffic congestion, the volume to capacity ratio, on one of our most highly congested roads. But transit would get points in a different way. It would get the most points if it's a project that operates in separate right-of-way parallel to one of those most congested roads. A TDM project could get 3 points just for being able to reduce peak hour trips or promoting alternatives to driving alone. We also had a separate criterion specifically giving points for providing alternatives to driving alone. And a highway project is not going to necessarily score as well in this criterion. So, for example, a highway project could get 5 points if it provides some HOV facilities. And it might get a lower number of points if it provides a combination of sidewalks and bike lanes and accessible bus stops. But, we had a very limited number of highway projects that were getting the maximum number of points in this category. Whereas the TDM projects did well in this category. The most points for actually providing vehicles, making van pool vehicles available. And then, one other, just for context, safety is the most heavily weighted priority in our plan. Highway projects would get no points in this category if it's widening for over 6 lanes. Because we've seen statistics that crash rates actually go up when you're widening from 4 to 6 lanes or from 6 to 8 lanes. Also in this category, TDM projects were not getting any points. We did a lot of discussion with our advisory committees on this, and folks gave us ideas about, well, how could a TDM project, how could an intelligent transportation system project improve our safety situation? We never got any good ideas for the TDM projects. ITS, for example, could get some points for providing information about incidents or delays on the system. So anyway, those are just some examples of the scoring system and how this might be applied to a particular project. Interstate 4, right through our urban area, very congested. If it added lanes that were HOV lanes or hot lanes, and you'll see that in that line that says alternatives, if lanes are HOV or hot. Let's see if I can you see my little circle there? It could get more points if lanes were HOV lanes or hot lanes. It could get 5 points there, and that would make it one of the most high-scoring projects in the entire plan. But if not, and just got 0 points in that category, then it got kind of an average score. This scoring system helped us reorient our spending patterns. Historically, we spent about 83% of our available funds on major roads. I'm jumping here to a statistic from our 5-year Transportation Improvement Program, which is the document that implements the long-range plan's priorities. And so this is historical from the 5-year TIP that led up to our long-range plan. But we knew from our public outreach during the long-range plan, from public surveys, from workshops, that folks wanted a more multimodal mix of spending and more of those funds going to transit, walking and biking improvements, less to highways. So in our long-range plan, we were able to achieve a more even split. In this diagram, TDM is included in the transit portion of the spending. Transit also includes shuttles. It includes paratransit services. Some examples of projects that became priorities for funding were hot lanes on our interstate highways. So you saw the scoring for Interstate 4. This is a particular study on Interstate 75, and our long-range plan put a priority on those hot lanes on I-75. We also had some high-priority TDM projects. These are considered good business by our board as part of maintaining and optimizing our existing roadway system. So through the long-range plan, we've put a high priority on the Regional Commuter Assistance Program and also on acquiring vehicles for the van pool program. Prioritizing those projects in the long-range plan sets them up as candidates to receive federal and state funding in the 5-year improvement program. So this is where it's really important to have those cost estimates. Part of the long-range TDM plan, I don't remember if Sandy mentioned this or not, but part of that plan actually identified cost estimates for the TDM activities. And that's an important input to this process where we're prioritizing those projects for funding. Your MPO is also required to have a congestion management process that helps shape the long-range plan by defining what the transportation problems are in the community and identifying strategies to address those problems. It is required to be a data-driven process, and like any other process like that, the objectives that you set at the beginning and the performance measures that you create more or less determine the strategies that are recommended out of it. We're doing an update right now of our congestion management process. We're reviewing our goals and objectives. So this is just a sample of what you might see in your MPO's congestion management process. For example, a goal to improve reliability of travel. Crash rates might be a factor that your MPO would look at as part of that. Another goal might be to shift trips to non-single occupant vehicle modes. In our congestion management process, we are using this goal to look at the effectiveness of our transit system and our walk-bike networks primarily. We also have a goal to reduce peak hour impacts on our transportation system, and this is where we've integrated TDM. Intersection operations are also a peak hour focus, so that's one of our issues here, major issue 3A, constrained roads and intersections. But I'm going to move on to major issue 3B, which is unchecked demand. TDM is going to make the most noticeable measurable difference to us in our plan at peak hour, looking at, for example, when our freeway is 90% full, it can still run, and it's those last few percent that create gridlock. So a little bit of a change can make a big difference in the operation of the system. And some of the strategies that are then identified out of this process for reducing peak hour demand include things like variable pricing, ramp metering, TDM programs. So this is where we're looking at those forecasts like out of the commuter model that Sandy mentioned, where we're looking at a % decrease in vehicle miles traveled in the long term as a result of some very specific TDM strategies. So just to wrap up the congestion management process, it really helps the MPO define what it's focusing on. It generates those projects that become the needs assessment for the long-range plan. There's also an important consideration. If your region is not meeting air quality standards, then there's a requirement that you demonstrate before you widen a road that you've looked at all of your congestion management process strategies and basically exhausted those before deciding to widen a road. So this is an important criterion, and it can help plug TDM into that screening process. So finally, just a couple of words about air quality standards. If your region is a non-attainment or a maintenance area for an air quality standard, then other requirements for your MPO also apply. The MPO's plans have to meet a budget for the total amount of pollution that can be emitted from vehicles. Many MPOs right now are watching the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which has proposed to revise and lower the standard for ozone. They have made a couple of announcements that they will propagate a new standard. We don't know at this point if we're going to see a new standard by the end of July, but we're all keeping an eye on this. Once the standard is set, and of course there are standards for other aspects of air quality other than ozone, but once standards are set, the state government sets a budget for how much pollution can come from various sources in the region, including point sources like power plants and mobile sources like vehicles in the transportation system. The state may identify TDM as one of the control strategies that a region can implement to reduce its emissions. So this is another point where a TDM agency may want to be plugged into this process. Just a couple of examples. Charlotte and Denver both were dealing with air quality non-attainment situations in the 1990s. Charlotte, combination of transit strategies and growth strategies. Denver, just a wide variety of strategies, including travel demand as one of those components. Some of you may know Atlanta's story. In the 1990s, they had what's called a conformity lapse. That means that their plans were not approved as basically meeting that budget, their transportation plans. That can put your federal funding in jeopardy for road widening projects. So what happened here is that some of the federal money was redirected to other types of projects, including safety, transit, bicycle pedestrian, basically anything that didn't involve roadway capacity. So that's a quick overview of some of the bread and butter activities at your MPO. I just want to emphasize that your participation in these plans is really important. Sandy has been kind of side by side with us in all of these processes for many years. And TDM is a major part of the plants in Tampa, you know, in large part because of her agency's continued involvement in the planning process. So on behalf of the MPOs, we hope to continue to see you all, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Beth. It's absolutely intriguing to think of some new ways that we might be involved and help our regions solve some of the challenges that they are addressing. So I would like to thank all of our audience for their attention as our speakers have been giving us their overview. And now it's our turn to ask questions and ask our speakers to kind of fill out the kinds of things that they talked about initially. Sandy, I was intrigued with your talk about performance standards and the kind of measurables and deliverables that you developed. Can you give us some examples?
Well, it's basically not just asking for funding and then not having a way to to say, okay, for this much money we can produce these results. That's where the modeling of what we were intending to do, I mean, taking a look at all the strategies that we were using at that particular time, looking at telework, looking at the van pool program, looking at the ride matching stuff. Actually, what came out loud and clear for this area because of the way things are going here, the van pool program did extremely well. And as Beth mentioned, the investment in van pool for this area has been just phenomenal. I will tell you that at the time when this plan was actually adopted, basically we were looking at probably 15, maybe 16 vans in the area, and to date we have now 84. And largely because of the investments that have come through our relationship with the MPO. So being able to quantify that the van pool program through this process garnered us a good funding stream that has been sustainable, and we look forward to that continuing.
Terrific. Our slide up on the screen is reminding our audience that there are two ways to ask questions. You can ask a question online, and you can also ask a question by phone. Jennifer, do we have anybody on the phone?
No, Donna, not right now.
Jennifer's looking, and she has her phone on mute.
No phone questions right now.
I'm going to guess that maybe we don't have anybody on the phone just yet. So let me go to some of the questions that folks have been asking online. Egan, folks were intrigued with some of the references that are coming along, and they wanted to know when they would be ready for distribution. Specifically, when is the desk reference going to be ready for distribution, and is there a list of cities and locations that will be hosting workshops?
The desk reference should be ready early next year. There are a couple of cities that we're going to hold workshops on using the draft version of the document to get some feedback. We are in the process of finalizing with some cities. We're also going to try to coordinate with ACT, and at the October conference, we're trying to have a half-day seminar to roll out the desk reference and get feedback from your group as well as to whether or not they, where we can tweak the document somewhat to get it to be more productive. Some of the cities we've been looking at, I think it's Orlando would be one of the locations. That's pretty close to Sandy and Beth, so we're hoping that they can be involved in the process as well. There are a couple other areas I'm not quite sure if we've finalized on those locations yet, but that's going to occur within the next couple of months to close out at the end of October.
Thank you.
Probably going to be 6 workshops and 2 seminars.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I'm going on to some additional questions that are coming in online. Sandy, one of our questioners would like to know if you ran into resistance in developing the long-range plan, and what kind of resistance you ran into.
I don't know if resistance is the right word. I mean, I think everybody had to give it some thought because traditionally in times past, again, TDM was not exactly the first thing you thought.
At the tone, you will be able to speak and be heard by everyone.
I think everybody would agree now that the economy has changed and the outlook has changed on what we want to do as far as this country's sustainability in all kinds of areas, especially transportation, that TDM is now coming more into its own. But I will say back when we were first doing this, I don't think resistance was the word. I think everybody had to step back and take a look at it and say, does this make any sense? And after a lot of discussion, yes, it did. So that's pretty much my take on it.
Okay, so not so much resistance. This may be the flip side of the same question, but in Tampa, how did the region entice partners to participate in the planning process, both for the TDM plan and Beth more broadly?
I'm not exactly sure of the question because basically in getting the plan together, it was just a basis of saying we want to, the message to the potential partners in sitting down and making the decisions on the TDM plan was we want to make this a situation where everybody can agree to the language, everybody can agree to the strategies and what we think the potential outcome. It was almost like some of the early meetings were almost like having focus group meetings because we had to basically instruct and in some cases change people's mind about what those TDM strategies actually could do. Or and a lot of this, you know, the assistance with Cutter was just absolutely brilliant for that because they were able to take them down a situation and say, okay, if you do X, then you will get Y, and it was very much a more concise situation where people could grasp it. And I think in times before that, people just didn't really. You think you kind of thought about TDM strategies, oh, that carpooling stuff, and the realization of, you know, it's sometimes it's a time, mode, place, shift kind of thing, just like Egan said in the beginning of his presentation on the definition of what TDM strategies are. It's not readily understandable that it's much more than just a carpooling situation.
Could I add something to that too?
Please,
this is Beth. If I remember right, we had a county commissioner on our board at that time too, who I think she was interested in TDM as an alternative to subsidizing public transit. You know, and I know that this has, you know, talking about it in this way has a lot of implications, and we don't want to go too far down this path. But it was interesting that it was talked about a little bit as almost like a private sector way to provide trips, as opposed to the public sort of having control, providing all of the rides, and then, you know, individuals have to kind of conform to the public transit agency's schedule. There was sort of, you know, carpooling and ride matching and emergency ride home was more, you know, local people kind of doing it themselves. There was a little bit of that kind of political backdrop to this conversation.
Do you think when the conversation was over that perception still persisted?
It was more from one particular commissioner.
Okay. Very good. Folks are really intrigued with this TDM plan, and another questioner would like to know the time frame for completing the original TDM long-term plan and its budget. How much time and how much money?
I believe, if I'm correct, we were in process for less than a year. It started in the fall of 2000, and it was completed in 2001. And Phil, if you can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong with my time frame, feel free to do so. And the cost of the plan was $40,000.
I think you got a bargain.
I know I got a bargain.
Wow, wow. Okay, I'm going to shift the perspective a little bit. We have a questioner asking about organizations' role in enforcing TDM. Do public and planning agencies ensure that the programs are consistently carried out? You know, if you are expecting a certain percentage of reduction to come from new developments, who makes sure that that's really happening?
Beth, you want to take a stab at this, or you want me to?
I haven't been as involved in development review.
Well, I will say that as a part of the process, again, people at the table are the folks that review. From a regional perspective, it is not so much in place, although all of the counties that we serve for the Commuter Assistance Program do have language that speaks to using these strategies in the planning process. I will tell you that because of the stronger language in the Hillsborough plan, we get more telephone calls and information from local developers doing their developments and wanting to include these strategies. The hard part about this whole process is that element of how do you make sure that they're doing what they said they're going to do. That's always been the challenge, and basically I think that's the challenge with anything to do with the long-range plans and the elements that people have to do this or that or the other to get through their development orders. All we can do is make sure that everyone that we come in contact with is to actually give them the information, follow up with them as our agency. I will say, unhappily, because the redevelopment situation down here is just like the rest of the country, we haven't been getting as many calls lately, but, you know, when things are done, we are still getting the calls. As far as the follow-up, though, and being able to insist that things be done, sometimes that's a little more difficult situation. But at least the foundation and the process is given to them so that hopefully it will actually make a difference. I will say this. I'm a strong proponent of there being a national model or a national set of strategies that needs to be included in development. And I would love to see that developed at some time. I've suggested it as a project several times to several different entities, and we'll see where that goes.
Egan certainly in his presentation talked about the importance in the planning process of that feedback loop, you know, where you kind of go back and see how you did and adjust. And if I was paying attention, the long-term TDM plan is targeted to reduce congestion, reduce VMT by 5% in 20 years. Mm-hmm. So what is Hillsborough County's plan in terms of measuring that and seeing if you achieved it and adjusting along the way?
That's where the congestion management process comes in.
Okay.
That MPO is supposed to do monitoring reports periodically and to track some of those measurables. In fact, we are all reviewed by Federal Highway, and one of the things that we're asked to provide for Federal Highway to show that we're doing a good job as MPOs is reporting on the effectiveness of our congestion management strategies. So that's exactly the kind of thing that we would want to monitor on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
This is Egan. I just wanted to add, as Beth indicated, the CMP is required to do some of that look back. So if you get your TDM involved and as part of the CMP process, the actual monitoring and the feedback would be part of that overall congestion management process. So it becomes, even though you're trying to promote TDM, you still get involved with the MPO, and the MPO actually supports your efforts and actually helps you with the monitoring of the TDM strategy and ensuring that the strategies are successful.
Thank you. I'm mindful that we are coming to the end of the time that we asked for from everybody today, but I'm going to sneak in here one more question that goes sort of, we've kind of come from a large planning process. This is a question about something very specific, and it's a question about the Vanpool program, Sandy, that example that you used about the Vanpool program showing strong effectiveness, you therefore targeting funds in that area. How did you invest in the Vanpool program, this questioner wants to know, and over what kind of a time period?
Well, basically, we've been investing in the Vanpool program at varying levels depending on the availability of funds. And keep in mind, we're not just dealing with Hillsborough County on this, but we're also dealing with the other counties that are within our region. So it's not just going through the Hillsborough County effort; it's also going through the other four. Basically, the two main counties, and I don't want to say it like that, the two highly urbanized counties in our region are Pinellas and Hillsborough counties, which are adjoining. And then to the north, we have 3 additional counties that are are suburban to rural in nature. Now, our van pool program, as I said, to date now has 84 vans. We are growing at a rate of somewhere between 10 and 12 vans a year, and we have consistently been doing that throughout this economic downturn. I will tell you that we have applied for and in the past substantiated our program with congestion mitigation and air quality funds. But when that went away for the state of Florida, we do not currently have that funding available to us. That may all change when the air quality designation comes out, and we're hoping to hear about that sometime in the not-too-distant future. But until then, we lost a lot of funding, actually, from that particular aspect. But we had several large grants that were given to us that helped sustain the program from a level of from county to county. Hillsborough has been very proactive in allowing us to access CMAQ funds, and then after CMAQ went away, we applied for surface transportation funds, and were successful in getting those as well. So basically, over the years, I couldn't give you a figure right off the top of my head right now. If anybody wants to email me, I'll try to put that together and get it back out to you. But basically, through STP funding and that, we used to fund the capital portion of the van pool lease. We have just recently, within the last year, gone to a flat fee situation. We have reduced the amount of subsidy that we give through our program funding so that we can extend our funding a little bit more prevalently, and for the user to actually bear the cost a little bit more. And I will tell you, we haven't lost a single van when we did that. So it's we now, I think the contribution now is $400 per vehicle, and 2/3 of the vehicle cost is borne by the end users. So it's a 1/3 to 2/3 situation.
Nice fair recovery.
Yeah, it is. It's very, 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 very desirable.
With that, I would like all of our speakers to hear the roaring round of applause that you're getting from our audience. Thanks very much for, I think you gave us a college course in the course of an hour here on transportation planning, and I'd like to particularly thank you for your skill in targeting your remarks to our audience and really understanding that we were all TDM professionals and most interested in how we could advance TDM efforts with this approach. So thank you, Egan, Sandy, and Beth. Let us all as speakers now turn around, and audience, please hear the rounding, the round of applause for you. Thank you for your interest and your questions. Know that this program will be posted on the Nectar website in a couple of days, so if there were particular statistics or things that you want to review, or if there's someone in your organization who needed to hear this program and couldn't be here, it will be available soon. On behalf of Phil Winters and the team at Nectar, Jennifer and Phil and I, a reminder, please, to complete the evaluation form. That helps us do a better job and bring you programs that meet your needs. A special notice to the certified planners out there: if you want to get credits, you do need to fill out the evaluation form. So thanks for another thought-provoking afternoon, and continued success in your TDM efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.